everyone, and welcome to this cosplay tutorial. Ever since I saw Warcraft the beginning in cinemas years ago, I really wanted to make my own Durotan cosplay. Now, I know he's all bare torso and all, but I was going to make a female-friendly version of it. Since this is a very complex cosplay with a lot of details to it, I'm going to make several videos. Starting with the magnificent wolf headpiece that Durotan wears for the Magora, also known as his late pet and companion Stormfang. Let's go! First up, I needed to make a base to be able to wear it. And so I simply took an old caps from my cupboard and covered it with plastic wrap and masking tape. Then for the pattern, I drew several lines around it, so I would be able to lay it flat. The triangle shape in the front will be the upper jaw of the wolf. The pattern for most pieces in this tutorial is in the description below. Release the pattern from the hat by cutting it following the lines. Use the pattern pieces to draw on 5mm foam, then cut them out using an X-Acto knife. Use contact glue on the sides you want to connect and spread it out thin with the leftover piece of foam. Wait until the glue is dry to the touch and press together the pieces carefully. And I really mean carefully, because there's no way back if you mess up. The hat was a bit too long on the sides because it covered up my ears. So I drew a line where I wanted the edge to go and then cut it off. To make more of a shape on the front, I glued a piece of a very low density soft foam on the front of the headpiece. Then I shaped it a little with a pair of scissors to make it less edgy. Next, I cut a 5mm thick rectangle to add as further support on the front. Now I needed to shape the face. I reused the pattern pieces 1 to 2 and 7 to 8 and taped them together. I then took some bubble wrap and cotton, anything will work, it's just to give a bit of a volume to the mouthpiece. I'm using masking tape and plastic as before until you have a nice shape you could work with. Then draw on the basic facial features. These patterns are also in the description below. Then cut loose the pattern pieces again. Transfer the face pieces to 5mm foam, cut them out and glue the sides together like this. Now glue this directly to the headpiece. For the ears I used 3mm foam and cut a slightly angled triangle with a split at the bottom so they will have a curve once glued together. I decided to add a piece of foam on the sides as well to fill in the gap, also with 3mm foam. Now draw the facial details directly on the foam. Details like the eyes, brows, nose, and the scarring. To make these details, I'm using foam clay. Roll 2 balls and shape them to be the eyes. Then continue making all the details like eyelids, the nose, all the fangs, and add some volume and texture to the face. For the nose, I used a pointy tool to stab a whole bunch of dots to make the texture more like a real wolf's snout. Then, using a knitting pin, I poked a hole through the nostrils to be able to place the piercing later on. To place the teeth, I used a long strip of foam clay to put inside the jaw and placed the fangs where I wanted them. I covered the inside of the upper jaw with a layer of foam clay as well to make it look more organic and not too flat. Then, using another strip of foam clay, I worked the outside of the teeth. Then I did the same on the inside. I used a tool with a round tip to shape the foam over the fangs to make it look more like the real deal. Let all the foam clay dry completely before you glue it directly on the headpiece. To even out the sharp edges, I used Quick Seal. Just smudge it on and smooth it out with your fingertips dipped in water. When that was dry, I started the priming and I used a black Plastidip spray for that. Make sure to have a little distance between the spray can and the object, or it will be a runny and uneven finish. If you're too far away, however, it will be very grainy. You may want to apply several layers, but make sure that each layer has completely set before you add another. For the base paint, I didn't need to go all over the head as it will be covered by fur, but I used a bit of black acrylic paint on the eyes and the teeth, as they will be visible. When the base coat is dried, I focused on the teeth. I mixed sort of an ivory color for the fangs themselves, using white and brown. Apply it to the teeth and wait until they're dry before continuing. Then I carefully painted the gum with a dirty pink color, using a very thin brush to have more control and avoid the fangs. For the eyes, I painted in a light gray shade since one of them is a blind eye. For the scars and the corner of the eyes, I used the same dirty pink as for the gum, but mixed it with a little bit of dark brown. I wasn't quite happy with the ears, so I decided to add more foam. I folded the ear pattern in two and drew it on a piece of thin foam. Cut it out and add contact glue to both sides and stick it together. Then add glue on the forehead and underneath the earpiece and glue it in a slight curve. For the non-blind eye, I printed out a photo of a realistic wolf eye. Then I cut it to size and I glued it on the head. I could have made the eye with resin as well, but I wanted to try something requiring less materials. To make it shiny, I coated it with a clear nail polish. Then for the eyelids and all that, I used a dark brown paint. For the paws, I made them out of foam clay and followed the same steps as for the head, before painting the claws black and the paws brown. For the fabric, I used a cheap fabric first and put it on the skull. Then I drew on lines where to cut so it would fit perfectly. To hold it in place, I put a bunch of pins in it. Make sure to cut holes for the ears, eyes, and nose. I made a piece for the face, the back of the head, and the ears. To make the cape with the arms, I used the cardigan to get the rough idea of the pattern. Then I cut off the arm and placed it in a different direction so it would naturally go over the shoulder. Then, using the back piece and the piece from back of the head, I measured the space I needed to add in between and drew this on another piece of mock-up fabric. It still needed more fabric on the side of the head, so I pinned a piece of fabric on each side and drew a line where I needed to cut. I left all these pieces pinned together except the seam between the head and the side piece. Now I found the fluffy faux fur fabric I wanted to use, so no more errors allowed. I drew the pattern backwards on the backside of the fur and carefully cut it without cutting too much of the fur itself. I ended up with the back piece, the face, 4 ear pieces, and a copy of the arms and the side of the head, so I could have fur on both sides. I used a little comb on every side of the cut fabric pieces to get rid of the leftover fur. Then I pinned together the ears, the front of the face, and behind the ears. I decided to sew together these smaller pieces by hand because it was too thick for my sewing machine to handle. The seam doesn't need to be that pretty because it won't be visible underneath all the fur. Then turn them inside out. Then I sewed the side pieces to the head by hand as well. I doubled the side pieces to be furry on both sides, and then using an invisible plastic thread, I sewed it very roughly onto the face piece. For the paws and legs, I did use the machine because it's a large piece and a very straightforward seam. Follow the edge all around and turn it inside out. If the fur is caught in the seam, use the comb to straighten it out. For now it looks like a big floof, but we're gonna adjust that by giving it a little shave. Using an electric shaver and scissors, adjust the length of the fur on the wolf. It's very short on the face, around the eyes, nose, mouth, and inside the ears. On the paws as well, I needed the fur to be shorter to put on the claws and all that later. So I shaved a little bit on each side. Using contact glue, I covered the whole face and also the fabric for the face. Then I carefully placed it on correctly, making sure the holes for the eyes, ears, and nose are well lined up. Next up, I did the same with the back of the head. And lastly, the ears. Now I'm going to use a bit of hairspray on the face and ears and use the comb to brush the fur in the direction I want. So away from the eyes and straight upwards on the ears. For the piercing details, I'm using little pieces of leftover Worbla, heating it up and shaping it to be a nose ring, a couple of earrings, and the ring on the broken fang. On the nose ring, I'm also adding a wooden bead. Time to glue on the parts for the paws with hot glue. The claws on the front and the little toe beans on the back. Then I used hot glue again and carefully put some around the edges between the foam and the fabric to cover up the edges. Then I painted some dark brown on the glue with a small paintbrush. For the shadowing, I'm using a big paintbrush with some dark gray and black acrylics. Dip the brush in paint, dry it off with a towel, and paint where you want darker areas. Inside the ears, I'm using black. And on the face and cape, I'm using the gray one. Around the mouth area, I'm using a small paintbrush with some black paint to add a few little spots. The shadowing on the face is done, but the teeth are too clean. I'm using some dark brown oil paint and adding it to all the creaks between the gum and teeth before wiping it off straight away. Then for the piercings, I needed to paint it silver. So I'm using a bit of rub and buff and adding a clear top coat. When the paint is dry, fasten the ear clips with some hot glue. For the nose ring, I'm heating it to separate it before putting it through the hole in the nose and letting it cool down. Now I noticed there was sort of a leather strap attached between the mouth and the ear, and so I added a little pleather fabric piece and fastened it with some Worbla and hot glue. And with that, the Stormfang headpiece is all done, and I love it. It's lightweight because it's made of foam, which is good because wearing this with a wig underneath, that can get very warm very fast. I hope you liked this video. For more upcoming content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and click the little notifications bell. You can also follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and if you want to support my work, you can always get me a cup of coffee. All links are in the description below. Bye bye!